Every day, women in Egypt face the threat of gender-based violence in all facets of their lives, within the household, on the streets, and even at schools. To end this violence, our next team is going straight to the root of the problem to find the solution: men and boys. To show us how they're turning men and boys into champions against gender-based violence, please welcome from Egypt, Circles of Change.
Meet Umaya. She's a mother and wife who has been subjected to sexual harassment in Egypt.
The man in this photo is Nim. He is a tuk-tuk driver, which is a three-vehicle in Egypt transportation. It's like American taxi. It's used transportation only at slum area in Egypt.
If you ever felt threatened or scared or fearful when you have gotten into a taxi. But what if taxi is the only way you could get to work, to school, to see your family, and your taxi driver sexually harassed you? This is the reality for all Egyptian women, and this is definitely Umaya's reality.
The United Nations reports that 99.3% of Egyptian women has suffered from sexual harassment.
But recently, the silence around harassment and violence has been shattered. With the global Me Too movement, women around the world have shone a light on this global and pervasive issue. Historically, CARE was working on empowering women and raising their awareness to combat violence. But then we thought about it. Why are we focusing on women? If men are the perpetrators, why not start there?
Thank you. CARE Egypt has established the Circle of Change model with 27 tuk-tuk drivers. The program includes that therapy, gender training, art therapy, and leadership development to engage men and boys.
CARE studies on the pilot showed that tuk-tuk drivers like Nimr were harassing their passengers because they were overwhelmed with the pressure to sustain an income and lacked any emotional tools with which to express themselves. But through our therapy, Nimr uncovered that his behavior stemmed from his violent father, who electrocuted him as a form of punishment. But through our therapy, he began to draw whenever he felt frustrated or angry, and that helped him manage his anger. But that's not it. Through gender training, he subsequently learned to challenge his thought patterns and to actually identify alternative thoughts and actions.
With participants like Nimr, we didn't just stop there. We thought, why put our tuk-tuk driver back on the street to be agents of change? They joined a volunteer unit. They released awareness within their communities using therapy, arts, and sports.
Through that training, men and boys have actually transformed from threatening figures to allies of women and girls, enabling women and girls to use their services without any fear of harassment. 4 years later, Nimr is an integral part of our program. He's a community mobilizer, a volunteer, and an agent of change. And he was actually recently honored by UN Women for his work in Egypt. He and other tuk-tuk drivers receive stickers from CARE that declares their vehicles free and safe zones. Earning the trust of their passengers has improved their income earnings, who can now count on repeat customers. While the pilot focused on tuk-tuk drivers and tackled sexual harassment, results indicate that it could be replicated across sectors and on all forms of gender-based violence. In order to do this, we want to share what we have learned and our model with all of you. CARE thus plans to license its program and curriculum to a variety of implementing partners, initially on a national scale in Egypt, in order to assure that we maintain the quality standards that have in fact led to our high quality impact. We're talking about change of human behavior here. So what do we seek? We're here to ask you for 3 things. First, we need your expertise on gender-based violence, on engaging men and boys, and on art therapy. Gender-based violence can only end if we work together.
So please join us in our mission.
Second, we need your partnerships on licensing, branding, marketing, and communication in order to truly scale our pilot. And finally, we need a financial investment of $100,000. With that money, 30 of CARE staff capacities will be built, who will then equip other 40 local and international NGOs within Egypt and train 100,000 Egyptian men and boys as agents of change by 2020. These men and boys will further raise more awareness and more men and boys within their communities and allow more women and girls to live a dignified life that's free from violence. From 27 tuk-tuk drivers to 1,600 men and boys, we're multiplying our impact by 60 times. Additionally, with the global Me Too movement, we now have a window of opportunity to work with the private sector. When I asked you a few minutes ago how many of you have been harassed in a taxi, most of you raised your hands. Imagine me giving me this speech a few years later and less of you actually raise your hands. The world is now ready to actually tackle this problem like never before. Help us seize this defining moment in history and actually end the cycle of violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I think another round of applause. Let me get straight away into this. So it sounds to me that you're building a lot of your marketing on these agents of change. Tell us a little more about the challenges to that, because I'm sure there's got to be stigmatization. Like there's barriers to this. So how are you overcoming those things?
I mean, actually, I think the hardest part probably comes in the beginning, to actually get them to open up and realize that they're in fact perpetrators of GBV. So which is why we start with art therapy. Art therapy, they begin to draw, they begin to sing, they begin to act, and that just provides them with a platform to express themselves. And then it doesn't have to directly deal with violence, that comes later. In the beginning, we just want them to open up and realize that as men, they can actually have that platform to express themselves. But then through gender trainings, and then through street campaigns that they realize, they actually begin to act on that and realize that they were perpetrators, and then on the streets, they act on how and why gender-based violence should be tackled.
So it's interesting because it sounds like you're using some activist organizing work to kind of bring that out into kind of this business plan, if you will. So let me lead to my second question then. So what feedback loops are you using in that engagement work that lead you to some kind of business model?
What, sorry?
The feedback loops that lead you into this business model.
Actually, the whole circle, when we initially started, we didn't have a circle in place. It all came one after the other. So we knew that we needed to tackle sexual harassment in slum areas in Egypt, and we knew that art therapy has worked to allow these men to actually open up. And then through that, every step that we take, now the circle has 9 concrete steps, but every step that we took, they were involved in decision making. We took their feedback, we realized what wasn't working, so we changed that in the midst of the circle. And we now have a full circle that we have tested and fully evaluated and have seen the impact on these actual men and boys, and how they have transformed from actually threatening figures that now they're the ones who actually conduct awareness on their own. They go out on the streets, they work with the UN Women without even CARE's involvement. So they have changed and they've actually transformed on an individual level, and now they're working on changing their communities as well.
Thank you, thank you. Last question. You're asking for $100,000. As an investor, tell me what's the financial return and social return in this? Can you measure that?
Okay. Oh. Nice to go?
عربي هو عارف خليك انجليزي يلا.
Okay, all right, because he's going to translate. Right. As a fund, actually, we have 99.3% of Egyptian women who face harassment, and that's only one form of gender-based violence. So you have domestic violence, early marriage, FGM, teacher assaulting their students. So if actually for example, if we're talking about the private sector, a lot of women quit their jobs because they're constantly harassed at the workplace.
Okay.
A lot of the government is affected, and the funds for it is affected, and the budget is affected because you have a lot of divorce lawsuits at court because of domestic violence. So actually, if the communities, if the private sector, the government, we all realize that actually it's very costly. Gender-based violence costs every partner and everyone who's involved in it.
Right.
So it's beneficial for all.
Okay. Thank you.